Hello and welcome to another episode of Secrets and Mysteries. This is episode 48. This is going to be a redo of the original with an appropriate amount of volume. And we're going to be talking today in episode 48 about Posse Comitatus and the different branches of government and how the different pay statuses work in relationship to Posse Comitatus. And you'll learn probably a little bit more about the military than is going to be covered in those subjects, just so you have a fuller understanding. And without further ado, let's go to the thumbnail. Posse Comitatus is the regulation that covers the use of military personnel in the enforcement of civil law inside the United States. There are restrictions against just the general use of military to do that, and typically those statuses are reserved for militia, which, if you don't know, consists of your Army and Air National Guard members. Typically your reserve component and your active duty components are not allowed to enforce civil law inside the United States, except for under certain circumstances. And so we're going to clarify some of that. We're also going to get into the different types of branches, because it's really difficult to figure all this out unless you understand what the structure is that you're looking at. So for that, we're going to go to the next screen. So you may or may not know this, but when you break down reserve component into its two factions, which is Federal Reserves and State Militia, which is also called National or Air National Guard, and then you separate those also from the active component, you actually end up with 13 different branches of service. And this is a diagram that gives you their ages that they accept enlistment, and also it basically breaks down their different military service patches or seals, just so you can get an idea. Now, if you are reserve component, that being Federal Reserves or State Militia, you are Title 32 if you are on active duty under those branches. There are different types of Title 32 status, and I will get to that. If you are on an active component status under Title 10, then that's when people go, oh, I'm going to go join the Army, and they go away and they join the Army. And they're not like in the National Guard or Reserves, okay? So let's just go through them really quick. You've got the Coast Guard and you've got the Coast Guard Reserve, okay? And that is the active component and the Federal Reserve. When you say reserve, it's a federal level reserve component. When you say National Guard or Air National Guard, that is a state level military component, and that is what they say when they're talking about militia under Posse Comitatus. Okay? And that's why when they deployed soldiers to Washington, D.C., they did so from the National Guard, because it's the easiest way to get through the Posse Comitatus restrictions. But there are ways to bring in other Title 32 and other Title 10 soldiers for the purposes of Posse Comitatus under certain situations. But we'll get to that also in a minute. Let's just talk about these 13 different branches. Now, Space Force is, as I understand it right now, only an active component service. So it doesn't have a Federal Reserve, and there are no militia who are part of Space Force, and I'm not sure that there will be for quite a long time. But so that's one of the 13. Then, of course, you've got the Marine and the Marine Reserves. We've talked about the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard Reserve. You've got the Navy and the Navy Reserve. With the Army and the Air Force, you actually have three component branches. With the Army, you have the Active Duty Army, Army Reserve, and Army National Guard, with the National Guard again being the militia. And then you've got the Air Force Reserve, and the Air National Guard, and the Air National Guard also being considered militia. For some of you, you probably didn't know there were that many branches of service, but there are. And you can see that they're very similar in the amount, in the ages that they will take for different enlistments. And those age ranges will vary. They say it might be 17 to 39 for a certain branch now, but if their numbers get really swell, they swell, and they get a lot of recruits, they may lower the maximum age to whatever. I've seen it as low as 30, 31. And that's because they want you to be able to complete a military career of 20 years before you get out, and they also don't want you to be too old by the end of that career. When recruitment is low, they will increase that number up to approximately age 39, and I've seen people wavered up to age 40, even 41, under certain circumstances. I'm going to provide links to both the Posse Comitatus Act and Title 10 and Title 32, PDFs in this video, so that you can, if you're really interested, you can read them for yourself. So while you're serving on active duty, you are under Title 10. If you are part of the active component, or if you're part of the reserve component and you're stationed overseas in some theater somewhere over there. There are certain exceptions to that, but they are rare. So generally speaking, if a reserve component soldier, sailor, airman, marine, whatever, is stationed overseas in a theater combat or on some special type of envoy mission, they are typically under Title 10 status, just so you know. There are exceptions, like I said, where they can do this under Title 32. Title 32 is your full-time military personnel who are serving in reserve component. That could be reserve, that could be National Guard, and they are typically the people who are either conducting training or taking care of administrative responsibilities. There are other types of military or paramilitary status for reserve components. I'll get into those in a little bit. But if you are an active duty military pay status for a reserve component, it is typically under Title 32, especially in a training or administrative status. There are a couple of other additional statuses that you can be in as a reserve component soldier, sailor, airman, service member. Like I said, you can be in the reserves or the Army National Guard or Air National Guard. But when you're doing that as a weekend warrior, where you're going in and you're doing the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year training, that is under what's called MUTA or MUTA, or Military Unit Training Assembly. And that is a drill status. Okay, so you're a member of the Guard, but you don't go there every single day to do training or administrative work. You just go on the weekend drills to drill with your unit. That is MUTA, means Military Unit Training Assembly. And if it's a MUTA 1, that is 1 day's worth of pay and or a 4-hour block. You can do 2 MUTAs in 1 day. So if you do a MUTA 4, say it's a Saturday and a Sunday, that's 4 days worth of pay that you earn in 2 days because you're doing 4 4-hour blocks, if that makes any sense. Now, there's an additional status. If you are a MUTA or an M-Day soldier, you can also be a civil service technician, where when you're not in a MUTA status, that 1 weekend a month, you can be also in a military uniform, but you are actually a civilian, and typically these statuses are left for, say, aircraft mechanics, truck mechanics, other technical personnel who maintain the unit's equipment on a day-to-day basis, but do so in a civil service pay scale, which is GS, WG, or what's the other one? Or WS. That was the other one. These are different types of civilian pay scales for federal service. And these are federal civil service technicians who are hired because they're members of the unit. You have to be a member of the unit, and you typically do wear your uniform even though you're in a civilian pay status. I know that's very confusing. I just mentioned those things because I wanted you to have a fuller understanding of the complexity of the military system, and also the different types of pay status you can end up in. To complicate things a little further, you can also be in what's called state active duty. Now, active duty funds are traced back to the federal government, and state active duty, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But those are funds that are directly managed by the state, and the federal government doesn't really get involved in the management of those funds too much once they're allocated. So, for instance, the governor can decide, I'm going to put my guys on active duty using my state active duty funds, and I want them to respond to this flood, that tornado, this various situation, whatever it is. So that's an additional status that you can be in, which is also not in violation of Posse Comitatus restrictions. So to be clear, civil service technicians, people under MDay or MUTA status, or people under active duty are all not in violation of Posse Comitatus when they are in their pay status. However, civil service technicians are not considered military, so therefore they don't go out and serve, like enforcing laws and that kind of stuff. They don't do it. That's not something that happens. But under an MDay status, they can serve sort of in that capacity. Typically, that does not happen. Typically, they are put on some type of active duty to be under the Posse Comitatus Act. And I don't know if anyone's even ever been in a MUTA status and go out and do a job that is enforcement of Posse Comitatus allocations or allotments. I think it's typically some type of active duty status, whether it be Title 32, Title 10, or state active duty. Now, for Title 10 personnel who are not in violation of Posse Comitatus, certain pre-existing conditions have to be in place. Typically, there has to be a state of emergency of some kind, and that state of emergency has to be declared by the president. Or under FEMA, so in a situation where FEMA is in control, with or without the president being directly in charge or supervising. Once FEMA is in charge of an area, then it is okay also for Title 10 personnel to be enforcing civil law and not be in violation of Posse Comitatus, because in those situations, under a declaration of national emergency, and then for whatever reason that the FEMA is involved, it's sort of a second thing, and third, in a situation where there is martial law. Under those three conditions, any one of them, Title 10 personnel can enforce civil law, because in those three situations, Posse Comitatus is set aside and is no longer in effect. And, essentially in all three of those situations, although it's not always called this, essentially you have the application of martial law. So just so you understand. And yes, you can mix and match these different groups within an area and have them all be in compliance with the application of Posse Comitatus, because when you do that, when you have Title 10 and Title 32 troops sharing a certain area and they are enforcing civil law, then that means that Posse Comitatus has been set aside because a state of national emergency has been declared, FEMA for some reason might be in control of the area, or martial law has been declared. So under those situations, again, Posse Comitatus is either set aside or those troops are not in violation of Posse Comitatus. Here is a recap. This is Posse Comitatus not in violation of, and under active duty again, it's state of emergency declared, or FEMA is in charge of that area, or martial law has been declared. For reserve components who are considered part of the militia, these are the different pay statuses, which we didn't really get into before. So these are all Title 32. AGR, which is Active Guard Reserve, these are your typical full-timers who do the administrative paperwork, to take care of people's schooling, awards, training assignments, that sort of thing. ADSW is active duty special work, and that is basically, it's not used as often as it used to be, but basically there are certain types of either detachments or units or missions you can be assigned to where Title 32 individuals can be put on this type of order to, conduct the mission, whatever it might be. This is sometimes used with like assisting law enforcement missions, especially when it's used like of equipment or specialized training. The differences between ADSW and ADOS are a little difficult to explain. ADOS means active duty operational support, and it really kind of fits the description I just gave you for active duty special work. There are some differences between that and ADOS, and I'm not going to try to explain them because you're just going to have to, if you really care, you're going to have to look it up yourself and just so you can sift through the tea leaves on that. And then, of course, there's M-Day, MUTA status, where I explained that a 4-hour block is, in terms of pay, equated to 1 day's worth of military pay, even though it's only a 4-hour block. And they do this just so they kind of make it financially worthwhile for someone to be a member of the military in that pay status, so that you don't go to the weekend drill and kind of waste your whole weekend for peanuts. That's essentially why they do it. I mean, they justify it in other ways, but that's what's going on. And then state active duty, again, that's typically slightly less pay for some reason, but it's not that bad. And the way they do that, if you have another job, a civilian job, and you are put on state active duty orders, and let's say you're a police officer and you actually make a decent amount of money for a day's work, what they will do is they will pay you the state active duty money, and then you're allowed to make up the difference with your employer. I don't know if that's true with every state. I know it's true with some states. But that's another pay status that you can be on. And there are other retirement considerations for that are not super awesome. But you can be in the state active duty status and be not in violation of Posse Comitatus. So there you go. That's the recap. If you like this video, this is the Redux, by the way. The first one, the sound was terrible. So I added a few slides, expanded a little bit on this one. So this is my other social media accounts. BitChute's still kind of shaky. I don't know. I hope they get some servers pretty soon. But please like this video. Please share it. And also, if you're having problems finding me on any of these other places, please let me know, and I will drop a link to that in your comment. I try to get to all the comments on my channel just because I think, I'm not that big. I should be able to do it. So hopefully that's going to work. I noticed that I'm losing some subscribers. I think that's because people are moving to other channels, actually. So, and I know that some people who are very conservative are getting bounced off of YouTube. It's the environment. It's, it's just the way it is. We know about that. Please come over, though, if you are on any of these other channels. Rumble seems like it's working pretty well. Gab. I haven't spent a lot of time on MeWe yet. I hope to maybe do a little bit of that today if I can get to it. But I also hope to put out another video today on another secrets and mysteries type topic. So anyway, I'll see you all soon. Love you, and pray out loud. Remember to pray out loud. All right? All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.